Hello YouTube and welcome back to another monthly chronicle, this time for July 2013. I'm in the future. Hello YouTube and welcome back to another monthly chronicle, this time for June 2013. I was wrong in my intro. I messed it up quite a few times actually. I didn't really know what to do for this month. June hasn't really been that good to me, so I'm just going to go with movie series ranking, and what I mean by that is I'm going to list a couple different movie series and then I'm going to rank each movie by my own personal opinion of which ones I think were best. So I tried to do this the other day, but then my camera was being a really big scumbag. It was like, oh, you can only take HD video for so long. Oh, you don't have any more space on your SD card. I'm just going to shut myself off. Oh, you're out of battery. I'm just going to shut yourself off. Shut yourself off. I fail at even trying to explain what my scumbag camera did, so yeah, I'm just going to cut until I have the next part of this done, because I think that was part of the problem before. Okay, so the first one I'm going to talk about is Star Wars, easily one of the most recognizable movie franchises of all, and there are going to be 3 more new movies coming out in the coming years, but obviously I haven't seen any of those because they aren't even in existence yet. Although according to George Lucas, they've been in existence for a very long time. But I'm going to rank these in backwards order. If you count Clone Wars, there was an animated feature film a while back. I kind of tend not to count that one, but I would put that one at number 7. At number 6, I would have to put Attack of the Clones. I really thought they misstepped on that movie. It was kind of a lame one overall. I think it's their weakest. I know a lot of people say Phantom Menace is the weakest, but I didn't think it was terrible. I think one of the reasons I actually kind of like Phantom Menace more than Attack of the Clones is because in Phantom Menace they were still using models and they were still using real landscapes and everything. So Phantom Menace, they at least did some stuff for real, whereas like in Revenge of the Sith, pretty much every single shot in that film, I think I read in an article that every single shot in that film had at least one thing that was digitally enhanced or added in. So you go an entire movie where basically just the actors are real and then like all the sets and everything else are just fake, so not one of my favorite things. But Revenge of the Sith has one thing going for it. Revenge of the Sith has one of my favorite Star Wars scenes in the history of all Star Wars scenes. Is the scene when the mask comes down in the first... That's one of the best scenes in all of Star Wars. I would have to put Return of the Jedi at number 3. The original, obviously you can already tell that I prefer the original trilogy to the prequel trilogy. Could have been a little better, but I guess what can you expect with Ewoks and George Lucas? And this is a really tough decision, having to pick between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back, because they're both really great movies and they're both my favorites. But if I had to pick one over the other, I guess I would have to put A New Hope at number 2 and Empire Strikes Back at number 1. A New Hope, I watched that one when I was a little kid and I loved it so much. I was instantly a Star Wars nerd, and Empire Strikes Back just made me even more of a Star Wars nerd. And I kind of think story-wise Empire Strikes Back I think is a little bit better, but there's just that nostalgia factor of A New Hope. So A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back are like this. They're really, really, really close in my mind, and it's really kind of hard to pick one over the other, but if I had to, I would have to pick Empire Strikes Back. This will be a shorter one as there are only 4 films in the series, but Indiana Jones. So I'm just going to go right in and say that Temple of Doom is my least favorite of the films. There's a lot in that film that I really don't like. The whole human sacrifice, child slavery, it's really not that, doesn't really strike a chord with me. Ironically though, Temple of Doom is my favorite soundtrack, and I'm a huge soundtrack nerd. So it has that going for it, but everything else, Plus there's the whole thing with Temple of Doom is so terribly full of mistakes. Just continuity issues, and especially audio-visual unsynchronizations. There's a lot of that in Temple of Doom where the actors' mouths won't even remotely match up to what the audience hears. So there's a lot of bad dubbing in Temple of Doom. And number 3, this might upset a lot of Indiana Jones nerds, that I like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull better than Temple of Doom. People always complain about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, saying it was a terrible Indiana Jones movie. I really don't think so. When you look at Raiders of the Lost Ark, Temple of Doom, and Last Crusade, they were all based off of 1930s serials that you would have seen back in the day, since all three of these films took place in the 30s. So when Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which takes place in the 50s now, being based off of science fiction B films, is that so unusual, since these ones were based off of things you would have seen in the 30s? Is it so unusual that Crystal Skull is based off of something you'd see in the 50s? So it's, in that way it works too. And people also complain about the scene with Indiana Jones going into the refrigerator and surviving a nuclear blast. Yes, that is implausible, but go back to Temple of Doom and watch the scene where they're in the airplane and they jump out of the airplane in an inflatable raft, and they land on a mountainside and don't break the raft, which is an inflatable raft, mind you. Keep that in mind the entire time I'm on this rant. They go down a mountainside in this, sledding in this inflatable raft, running into rocks and trees. They actually show them running into trees, and then they fly off of a cliff in that raft down into the middle of rapids, and they just whitewater raft all the way through this rapid in this inflatable raft. None of them get injured, and the raft does not take a single scratch. Now, how implausible is that? And how implausible is the scene in Crystal Skull in the refrigerator? I rest my case. I'm sorry if I offend a lot of Indiana Jones fans, but I really don't think Crystal Skull was that bad of a movie. I'll give you that Shia LaBeouf wasn't a good choice, maybe, but it's not a terrible movie. Number 2, I'm going to put Last Crusade, because that was a decent Indiana Jones film right there. That was, maybe it was Spielberg and Lucas trying to cover their tracks and make a good film after Temple of Doom caused PG-13 to even exist. And number 1, obviously, is Raiders of the Lost Ark. Now, Raiders of the Lost Ark is my favorite film in the history of films. So, obviously, that's going to be number 1. And I think I mentioned that in a previous monthly chronicle. If I didn't, well, now you know. So I'm going to go ahead and move on with the next one, which I think will have to be my last one, because I'm not sure how much space is left on this. You can kind of tell that I've categorized these two in a little different with odds and evens. That's because it's generally considered that in the Star Trek film franchise that the odd films are generally, to put it delicately, crap, and the evens are generally the awesome ones. That's not necessarily true, but it's mostly true, I'll give it that. So there are 12 Star Trek films, and I have seen all 12 of them, but I've only seen Final Frontier and Into Darkness once each. Everything else I've seen at least twice. So at number 12, I would have to put the motion picture. No, I changed my mind. Number 12, I would have to put The Final Frontier. There's a reason I've only seen that one once. It was kind of not that good at all. I'm sorry. And then at number 11, that's a really weird one. Number 11, I would have to put the motion picture. Now, there's a sequence in that film. It's 4 minutes and 44 seconds of establishing shots of the Enterprise, and that's kind of really hard to sit through. And that, I found out later that that movie was originally written to be a television episode of Star Trek Phase 2, which was a series that was never actually picked up. But it was written to be a television episode and then was later adapted into Star Trek the Motion Picture. So I kind of think it would have made a better television episode than an actual movie, because when you sit down and analyze the story, it would have been something that you might have seen more on, like the original series television show. Phase 2 eventually became Next Generation 20 years later. Or I guess it would have been 10 years later when they were actually planning Phase 2, but that's still not that great of a movie, the motion picture. Number 10, I think I'm going to put Generations at number 10, because I felt like they kind of built that one up as, oh, it's going to be this great movie, it's going to have both Captain Kirk and Captain Picard working together, and then it's basically like the last 20 minutes are Captain Kirk and Captain Picard, and about 10 minutes of that 20 minutes is Picard trying to get Kirk to actually realize that he's not actually there. Number 9, I think, I'm having trouble deciding whether I want to put Insurrection or Nemesis as number 9. I think I'll put Insurrection as number 9. Again, just another one. I think they could have done a little bit better if they had maybe thought it out a little bit more. Worf basically does nothing in this film, and he also basically does nothing in Nemesis either, which one thing I didn't, well, not that I didn't like, but I kind of thought was ironic about Nemesis was the fact that Tom Hardy, who plays Shinzon, I think it's Shinzon, is it Shinzor? Whatever he is, Tom Hardy's character. I found a lot of similarities between Tom Hardy's character in Nemesis and his character in The Dark Knight Rises. I don't know if anyone else has noticed that. I mean, this obviously came first, and then there's the opening scene too. I kind of felt was a huge ripoff of number 1, Naboo from Star Wars, which this would have been out shortly after Phantom Menace came out in theaters. So I kind of felt it looked a lot like Naboo in the opening scene, and then there's the part where they like disintegrate, turn to stone, and then the one guy falls and disintegrates, and it's basically just his clothes remaining. I felt like that was a huge ripoff of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone too, when Quirrell dies, and basically the exact same fashion and the exact same shot. So I kind of felt Nemesis kind of copied a little too much as well. And it wasn't that great of a story. I think I'm going to put First Contact at 7. You can kind of tell that I preferred the original cast movies more than the Next Generation casts. Number 6, I think I'm going to put Search for Spock at number 6. The thing that I find the hardest to get over about this film, well, I kind of think it's kind of an interesting film. It's that Christopher Lloyd plays the main Klingon villain, and I have a hard time taking him seriously because whenever I hear his voice, I just think it's Doc Brown. This may have come out the year before Back to the Future, or maybe it was 2 years before Back to the Future, I forget, but you watch that movie, and having watched Back to the Future prior to Search for Spock, I just watched that movie and I was like, it's Doc. It's Doc. He talks like Doc. At number 5, I don't know why I was about to say 6, but at 5 I would have to put Undiscovered Country. It was a pretty good film, I'm not gonna lie. Had some flimsy moments, but Spock's last line in that film was pretty funny too. This is why at number 4 I'm gonna put The Voyage Home, because as much as that movie was so utterly laughable plot-wise, it was still actually enjoyable movie. It was so corny and so cheesy that it actually kind of worked, even though it was one of the flimsiest stories out of all of these. Scene with Spock trying to swear more than makes up for it. Number 3, I am going to put Into Darkness at number 3. I've only seen that one once. It had a lot of pros and it had a lot of cons. That was a joke. Did you get it? But it had a lot of pros and cons. Benedict Cumberbatch, I kind of went into it expecting more out of him because I'm a huge fan of the BBC Sherlock series, in which he actually plays Sherlock Holmes. I went into this expecting a lot from him. While I still think he was really good, I was expecting more out of him than I actually got. He was still really good, but it was maybe not as much as I was expecting. At number 2, I'm going to put Star Trek, the 2009 remake Star Trek, or technically it's not even a remake, it's a reboot within a remake, so remake bootception. But yeah, it was actually a pretty good movie, all things considered, and I like the concept of alternate reality, because that really makes is an interesting plot device. And obviously at number 1, what is considered to be the best Star Trek movie out of all Star Trek movies, and I happen to agree, Wrath of Khan. Even with all the jokes about William Shatner screaming Khan, it's still a really good movie, and it kind of set the stage for sci-fi movies after that point too, I think. It's not like on the caliber of Empire Strikes Back or Star Wars or something like that, but it was still a well-known, well-respected movie. One of the best movie sequels out of all, considering it came right after Motion Picture. But yeah, that is my thing for Star Trek. And with that, I will leave you with the film fun fact of the month. I don't actually have one off the bat, So I will look one up on my phone really quick. Hopefully I don't run out of memory space while I'm looking it up. It is 11:38 p.m. and I'm really tired. I know what to look for. I got one that's really a good movie. Let me look up trivia from this. Sorry, I'm moving on. Okay, from the Beatles movie Hard Day's Night, which is a pretty good movie. George Harrison met his future wife during the filming of that movie, so there's your film fun fact of the week. She was one of the girls on the train. So, goodbye.